So we're learning the Igeres HaKodesh. We're going to finish today the 13th letter. 13 Gematria Echad, 1. And definitely this is a one-of-a-kind letter because the Alter Rebbe here finds a method for one who is left-oriented, Gvura-oriented, disciplined, strict, some would say cheap, whatever, everything that falls under left orientation. The Alter Rebbe finds a way of giving that person encouragement, and more than encouragement, showing him that really his giving of tzedakah is greater than someone who's magnanimous because he's right-oriented. He has a tendency to be chesed, to be benevolent. And this is a novelty because you think of someone who's giving and all of that, someone who is chesed. And Alter Rebbe also teaches us in this chapter, which is important for all of Hasidus and Kabbalah and Torah, that when you have a machlokes, or you have a disagreement between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the two schools of thought, and you find that the house of Shammai is stringent in every case, except 6 cases throughout the entire Talmud, and Hillel's vice versa. We have Hillel right here, and I can see it on Hillel. Hillel, you're probably from that school. Hillel is more chesed. Hillel is more mekel, more lenient, right? Except in 6 places. Now the question is, and the Alter Rebbe says that has to do with the neshama, has to do with the soul. Where does your soul come from? So Moshe Drucker is a very kind person. I'm convinced his soul comes from chesed, okay? But nevertheless, there are times when Moshe has to put his foot down and say, no, you're not gonna get it. I'm not giving in to you now. I'm not giving it to you because it'll hurt you. Well, that is Gvura. So the question is, how can someone?
He just put his foot down in his advice to you.
Yeah, well, he didn't. He told me to put my foot down. Very good, very good. Anyway, so the question is, if by nature, you hear this is the question, if the teva of a person is chesed, how can he do gvura? In other words, if you wouldn't argue, if you wouldn't position that it's a nature mitzad neshama from the neshama's perspective, then you would say kumzi kumza. Sometimes it's kind, sometimes I'm this, and like we live life. The question of the Balatanya is here, since the orientation of a person begins and is caused by their shoydish haneshama, what type of soul they have, not the body, not the mind, not the heart, not the habits. All that is a derivative of the neshama. So if that's the case, so if a person is given a neshama that's chesed, kind, orientation, how can he even display gvura? And like I said in one of the previous shiurim classes, that was the issue with Avram. Avram, the Midrash says, was the replacement of God's attribute of kindness. God created the world with 6 attributes, 10 attributes, but 6 days of creation, 7 days of creation, and chesed. No, and then the Midrash says, when Avram was born, he replaced chesed. That's a heavy statement. If Avram is chesed, how can he on the 3rd day after he's circumcised go out? That he went out and he invited the guests in. I explained the other day that's because the pain of not having guests were greater than the pain that he had from the incision, from the circumcision. But the question is on the other hand. At the end, you know what happened, Moshe? He said to his guests, he said to them, if you don't thank God, this is the way he publicized monotheism, if you don't thank the creator of the world for the food that you just ate, here's your bill. And it was a hefty bill. Like my wife said, now eggs here in Brooklyn are over $5 a pound in the stores that are considered inexpensive stores. So out in the desert, 3,000 years ago, things 4,000 years ago were very expensive. So Avram says, you don't thank God, you got to pay your bill. That notion is gevura. How is he able to do that? If by nature he's chesed. And the explanation that the Alter Rebbe alludes to here and it's brought in the Chassidus is, and then he says it not allude to, he speaks about it here. There is what we call, and we spoke about this, Hillel Isser said the word, there's the dominant gene and the recessive gene, which we call there's the Iker and the Tofel. What is primary, what is ancillary. So Chesed has within it an element of Gvura, and Gvura has within it an element of Chesed. And this is the reality when it comes at certain times when you need to access that recessive gene in whatever situation it's warranted. So in 6 places in Talmud, Shammai feels it's necessary to rule in a lenient way, contrary to his nature. That would be the recessive gene of Shammai. So the Alter Rebbe uses this entire idea to explain to a person who argues, I can't give tzedakah, or I'm going to give limited, know that, because I'm left-oriented, I'm gvur-oriented. The Alter Rebbe says, baloney. What do you mean baloney? Yes, you are left-oriented, but you have also an element of chesed. And when you give tzedakah, someone who is disciplined by nature, and that's because of the soul that you have, in a way, it's more genuine. Because it's not coming out of your nature, which is associated with self and ego. It's coming because Hashem says, give tzedakah. I don't want to give tzedakah. I do. It makes no difference. The halacha tells you give tzedakah, you give it. So the giving coming from a left orientation, a gvura orientation, is more genuine. And that's the Alter Rebbe's response to the person who says, well, it's not my tendency. I'll give you a little bit, That's what he's arguing over here and telling the shliach who brought this letter in 1792 to the different communities throughout Russia, White Russia, Belarusia, and Ukraine, and to get them to give tzedakah and more tzedakah to support his institutions and to support the communal food fund in Yozhne when people came and didn't have where to eat, and Pidyon Shvuyim redeeming the captives from the landowners, as we discussed in the first year. So all of this, the Alter Rebbe says, is for each and every one of you. But again, the chidush, the novelty here is that he's arguing that the one who wants to use the excuse, my nature is not this way. On the contrary, you have the ability to give tzedakah with more honesty and more purity, etc. Let's continue now on page 238, towards the bottom, the last line on the page. And we began the Pedic with the verse in Psalms where King David says, David HaMelech says, Mo rav tuvcha shetzavanta l'reyecha. How abundant is your goodness, God. David speaking to God, David speaking to Hashem. How wonderful and great is your rav tuvcha that you hid it l'reyecha, to those that fear you. So you understand? He doesn't say Asher tzafanta l'chasodecha Hillel. He doesn't say, who's getting the goodness from God, the abundance, those that have tremendous chesed. David HaMelech says no. He says, Morav tuvcha shetzafanta lireyecho, to the ones that have yira, to the ones who are left-oriented. That's how he's going to explain it. Look inside. V'omer al kain asher rav teib lebeis Yisrael. Therefore, David says that this goodness there is to the Jewish people, Hatzofin v'hagoli, the hidden and the revealed, were on top of Kuf Chof. Hu b'bchinas bli gvul umida. It's ad infinitum. It's without measurement and limitation. Lifi erech nefashasam, based on their souls, hamulu beshes beguf, that's invested in the body. Hashem since the Jew who serves God in such a manner, so therefore you too, Hashem, conduct yourself with them, b'midas chazdecha agodl, with your attribute of great kindness, chesed, b'li gvul v'tachlis, without any limitation, hanikra, which we summarize and we succinctly call, it's encapsulated in the words, Rav Chesed, right? There is Chesed Yoini, ordinary Chesed. Then there's an abundance of Chesed, Rav Chesed. So the Balatanya says, this Rav Chesed alludes to this experience that we're talking about right here. And he explains further, the is Chesed, the is Chesed. There's two types of kindness. You know, it's like you say, Moshe, there is and there is. There is and there is. There's kindness and there's kindness. One kindness, it's a limited kindness. You know, it's when it's good for me, that's when I do the kindness. V'is chesed. The other kindness is a limitless kindness. It's Rav Chesed. And explains, is chesed oilo. There is a chesed that's called a worldly chesed. Sheyesh kinegdoi ulumosoi midas adin chasav shalom, that there opposes, this chesed is opposed by judgment. You don't deserve. Why should God give you kindness? You don't deserve. Or why should I give you kindness? You acted inappropriately. No. So chesed oilam, the lower level of chesed, has opposition. And therefore, the argument on that type of chesed is l'maid u'letzamtzim chazdei v'tuvei, that Hashem should reduce and contract and minimize his kindness and his goodness. Aval, there's the higher level of chesed, aval chesed elyon, but the supernal chesed, hanikra, rav chesed, that's called an abundance of chesed, ein kenegdoi midas adin. There is no opposition of judgment on that level. To minimize and restrict God's abundant kindness, from expanding itself, without limitation. It comes from the energy of Hashem that's called the encompassing energy, Seviv Kol Almim. The whole Tmirin of Chol Tmira, I'm sorry, I skipped the line. I'm sorry. V'tmira, a few words I skipped. V'tmira the Chol Tmirin. The hidden within the hidden. That's the level of Seviv. Hanikra Keser Elyon, which is called Keser. So, Chevra, we talk about Isser, you learned many times, there's Keser, the crown. So the Keser is on the head of the king, right? So you have the faculties, the mind, the emotions, action, you have all that, right? Faculties and garments. But then there's a crown. The crown makes the king. No crown, no king. Keser, Keter, right? Now the Rebbe says this, and Keter is not in the head, it surrounds the top of the head. It's Seviv Kol Almin. It's the encompassing energy of God. In other words, it's not generated and measured by the recipient. And therefore, it has a infinite power that it has within it. So if you tap into Keser, you get the abundant good from a plateau, from a reality, from a level which is not generated by you. Okay? Does by you mean to say, sure, if you don't do anything, you're not getting Keser. You're not getting Keser if you don't work and you don't achieve. But at the same time, the what you get when you tap into Keser is way beyond what you deserve. That's Rav Chesed. And if I want you to, as you go through the day, to think about it, how in your own life, there are times when you see Hashem blessing you in a way, with showering you with kindness that you don't really deserve. Doesn't mean you're a bad guy. You're a good guy. You're doing good things. But, I think about this certain times when, it's always true, but you don't realize it. And when you take a moment and you think and you realize it, it's really Rav Chesed. In other words, Hashem, am I, what am I after all that you blessed me with children, wife, a house, friends, health? No, and naturally there's issues. Life is full of issues. That's the way it is. But in the bigger picture, Rav Chesed. So again, the normal day-to-day activities is hard to see the Rav Chesed. What you see is usually the most Chesed. But again, right? Chesed. You do something good, and all of a sudden someone says, why'd you say that? No good. All I meant was good. But you have opposition. That's the way it works. But then there's a time when you say something or you do something where it's so pure, it's so because it comes from Rav Chesed, where it overwhelms everyone and everything, and it's clear that this is genuine. The greatest thing is when a person is emes. We've spoken about this many times. When you're emes, you break through all barriers. Just last night, I was watching a clip of Reb Mendel Futterfa speaking in Kfar Chabad in 1973, Yutes Kislev, which it's tomorrow night. And Shazar was there, President Shazar. He passed away, I think, that following year or whatever. But he was there, and dignitaries were there. That's what they used to bring, many dignitaries, to the Yutes Kislev Habringa once a year in Kfar Chabad. And Reb Mendel, he was a Russian Jew, and he spoke. And this was after Yom Kippur Milchama, after the Yom Kippur War. And he spoke with such fire. I was looking at the faces of Shazar and other people who some were religious, they just were mesmerized. And it wasn't, the great wisdom that he was saying, because the man was speaking with heart and honesty. That, what he heard from the Rebbe, what we heard from the Rebbe that year, that Jews will be protected and there'll be great blessings and all that. The way he communicated it was emes. And emes, people melt for emes. Because many times, most people aren't emes 100%. So when you meet an experience of emes, you just melt away. The Alter Rebbe says this in different words when he talks about the Rav Chesed versus Chesed. Chesed, ordinary Chesed, can have an opponent, will have an opponent. Right? Is there helping people as a physician, this and that. He's right? And people have complaints. Why did you do this for me? Why don't you do that for me? I'm mamish trying to save your life. I'm trying to make you healthier, What am I, becoming rich off the system over there in Israel? No, I'm not becoming rich. Maybe in America I would make probably 5 times the salary, right? So, I'm doing it to help. I want to help. And yes, I need, parnasa, versteht sich. And there's complaints. Who's complaints? B'chlal, we have to train ourselves. I'm talking to myself. To not complain. We have to get that you have to work hard it's hard, but you have to eliminate that. In other words, complain about yourself. Don't complain about others. They might have done something wrong, and they do something wrong, and God knows the score. Don't worry. People know the score, and people aren't foolish. People at the end of the day know, right? And when we learn Chassidus, learn Musar, and learn Chassidus, especially Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov raises you to a different plateau. And that plateau, it's about the neshama. And that's what's unique over here in this whole Tanya, is the Alter Rebbe looks at everything from a soul perspective. Shabbos, I have to speak Motzei Shabbos in Forest Hills, North Forest Hills, Queens, at a Yutes Kislev gathering. And the topic is, what is Chassidus, etc. So I'm thinking of, how to say it succinctly to the people there. They're not, Chabadniks, Farbrengen, you know what I mean? It's all kinds of people. The whole idea of...
Study of divinity.
Yeah. That's my usual translation. That's what I said, and I still stand by that.
That's very succinct.
Yeah. But I want to also, maybe in Motzei Shabbos, tell him this vart that I'm sharing with you now, that it's the soul perspective, the neshama perspective, the Baal Shem Tov. In other words, like this. Before the Baal Shem Tov, the argument was very simple. You know how to learn, you're a mensch, you're a Jew. You don't know, you're an ignoramus, and you're a nothing. Comes along the Baal Shem Tov and says, oh really? Maybe the guy who doesn't know how to learn has a deeper and better soul than you. How do you know? And the Alter Rebbe in chapter 32, Avos Yisrael, expounds upon that in great length. But that's the Nakuda. That's a soul perspective. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. Don't judge a person by the garments they wear, by how they act, how they behave. Look at the soul. Look at the neshama. And that's a whole different approach. So the Alter Rebbe does this over here. That's what he's doing here. You see a person says, I'm left-oriented, I'm gvura, I have a nature this way. So what do you want from me? Says the Alter Rebbe. It starts with the soul, and the soul is not limited, and the soul has an element of chesed, and therefore access it. That's his word. Let's continue and finish. So he says, this is called Kesed Elyon. You will hide them in the hiding of your face. Another verse, Titz b'neim b'sukkah. You will hide them in the sukkah. The idea being, a sukkah encompasses a person, right? Takes you around. You go into a sukkah. Titz b'neim. It's a revelation of the Morav Tuvcha Shetzofanta that he began the letter 13. That's the Sukkah experience if you use it right. Chevra, tomorrow Mitzvah Shem will make a Farbrengen for Yutas Kislev. Everyone have a great day. Try to tell some of the Chevra to come tomorrow. Others, yes.
My father used to say this, and he got it from his Rebbe, from my Sadek, Kazanovsky. He says the sukkah is chibuk, like a hug. Hashem is hugging us.
Yes, and that's brought in Chassidus, so I believe I know where Kazanovsky got it from, but that's the word. That is the word, yes. It's a hug. Hashem is hugging us through the chuppah, through the sukkah. Seid gesund, Chevra. Have a great day. See everyone tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.